My husband sold me across a dinner table, and he did it in a language he thought I'd never understand. 17 years of marriage, and Owen still didn't know the woman sitting across from him had spent 4 years in Madrid, 2 more in Mexico City, close enough to boardrooms full of men who spoke exactly like this, men who believed a woman's silence meant she understood nothing at all. He raised his glass to a stranger, and said the words that ended us right there under the chandelier of a restaurant he'd chosen, because he thought it would impress everyone but me. He never once considered that I might be listening. Owen had been planning this dinner for weeks. The rooftop restaurant at the Belmont Hotel in Chicago, white tablecloths, a wine list he'd memorized just to look effortless. He told me it was the most important night of his career. Rafael Serrano, a private investor with more money than patience, was deciding whether to put $18 million behind a medical distribution project Owen had been chasing for almost 2 years. Northbridge Medical Systems needed this deal. Owen needed it more. 3 days before he'd bought me a dress. Deep navy, the kind of expensive that makes you hold your breath when you check the tag. I thought for one foolish second that it was a gesture of love. Then he handed it to me and said, "Don't talk too much tonight. Raphael likes elegant women, not women who feel the need to prove how smart they are." I let that sentence sit in the room without responding to it. I'd learned over 17 years that some comments were better absorbed than fought. We married young. I was 25, full of momentum, working compliance risk assessments for American companies expanding into Mexico, Colombia, Spain. I was good at it. I could read a balance sheet the way other people read faces, and I could catch a lie buried 3 clauses deep in a contract written in a language my husband couldn't even order dinner in. Then my mother had a stroke, and Sophie was still in diapers, and Owen said the words every ambitious man says to the woman holding his life together. "We're a team. You take care of things for a few years, and when my career stabilizes, you go back to work." A few years became nearly a decade. He never asked what those years in Madrid had actually taught me. He never wondered, not once, how fluent I really was, because he never thought to wonder about me at all. The dinner started politely enough. Raphael was courteous but guarded a man who watched more than he spoke. He didn't look at me the way Owen probably expected him to. If anything, he seemed uncomfortable every time Owen refilled my wine glass a little too eagerly, a little too fast. Owen talked big. Projections, timelines, numbers that didn't quite match what I'd glimpsed on his desk at home months ago. Numbers that had grown suspiciously kinder to his case since then. Raphael asked about patent ownership, about hospital certifications. Owen's answer wandered vague and rehearsed, and then the moment his English started failing him, he slipped into Spanish. He thought it made him safe. He leaned toward Raphael, voice low, casual, like men trading a joke between themselves. "Don't worry about her," he said. "Tonight, she's yours. Sign the agreement in the morning." Raphael did not smile. He set his glass down and told Owen flatly that he had never asked for anything like that. Owen pressed on anyway, oblivious to the way the air had changed. "I know what men like us have to do to close a deal like this. She'll listen. She always listens." I didn't flinch. I didn't drop my fork or gasp or give him the reaction he was used to getting from me when he pushed too far. I set my wine down, slowly smiled the way I'd smiled at 100 dinners just like this one, and said in English, "Excuse me, I need to use the ladies' room for a moment." Owen didn't even look up. I walked away from that table with my heels steady on the marble floor, and my pulse steadier than it had any right to be. Behind me I could hear him already moving on, already selling something else, some other version of me he thought was still sitting there. In the bathroom, I locked myself into a private stall, pulled out my phone, and called a number I hadn't dialed in 6 years. Owen thought I was in there crying. I was calling the one person who could end his deal before it ever began. The woman I called was Isabel Serrano, Raphael's older sister, and the person who actually controlled the family's investment fund. Years earlier, I'd worked a compliance review on a Serrano Capital deal in Mexico City, back when I still had a career and a name people trusted. I'd found a chain of shell companies buried in the paperwork, the kind of thing that would have cost the family millions if it had gone unnoticed. Isabel remembered that. She remembered me. We hadn't spoken in 6 years, but I'd kept her number the way you keep an old key. you're not sure you'll ever need again. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I'm having dinner with your brother, I said, my voice low, and even despite the stall door pressing cold against my back. My husband just offered me to him in exchange for a signature on an investment contract. Silence stretched for a few seconds. Then carefully, did my brother agree to this? No, Raphael refused. But my husband said something else. He said the hospital certifications were just a formality that they'd be sorted out after the money transferred. That got her attention faster than the first part had. Isabel was in the hotel one floor down preparing for tomorrow's investment meeting in a private conference room. She told me to go back to the table. Don't confront him. Don't warn him. Keep the call connected in my pocket and let her listen. I straightened my dress, checked my reflection, steady eyes, nothing betraying me, and walked back into the dining room like nothing had happened at all. Owen asked if I was okay. I told him I'd just felt lightheaded. He nodded already, turning back to Raphael, already slipping back into Spanish to boast that I was easy to manage, that I didn't understand the first thing about business. I let the words wash over me and reached for my water glass, tipping it just enough to spill a little onto the tablecloth, an excuse to bend down to reach into my bag to tap the recording app Maya had installed on my phone months ago, back when I still thought I'd never need it. Raphael's patience was thinning visibly now. Don't bring your wife into this, he said, flat and final. Owen barely paused. Everyone has a price. Hers is just attention. That was the moment the door to our private dining room opened. Isabel walked in with the fund's legal counsel, a step behind her, composed, unhurried, dressed like someone who'd already decided how this evening was going to end. In Spanish, she said, "It seems I've arrived at exactly the right moment." Owen turned. I watched the color drain from his face in real time. Watched him do the math. Watched him realize this wasn't just Raphael's sister making a social appearance. Isabel held 52% of the voting shares in Serrano Capital. Without her signature, there was no $18 million. There was no deal at all. She sat down beside me and switched to English, addressing Owen directly. You said the hospital certifications could be handled later. Can you explain that? Owen denied it, instantly smooth as ever, suggesting Isabel had misheard something lost in translation, that Spanish carried nuance that didn't always survive the crossing into English. That was when I spoke for the first time all night in perfect, unhurried Spanish. There was no nuance. You said exactly that the certifications were a formality. Then you said I would listen because I always listen. Owen went completely still. Raphael looked at me, then at Owen, understanding settling over his face that he too had been used, positioned as a prop in something that could have quietly destroyed his reputation if he hadn't pushed back. Isabel didn't kill the deal on the spot. She announced a 72-hour hold pending an independent review, which was in some ways worse for Owen than an outright rejection and insult could be walked back. A review meant someone was looking for something specific. It meant they suspected the numbers themselves. The drive home was silent except for Owen's fury simmering just beneath a thin, controlled surface. He accused me of humiliating him in front of the most important investor of his career. What humiliated you? I asked, watching the streetlight slide across the windshield. The fact that I understand Spanish or what you actually said? He didn't answer that. Instead, he pivoted the way he always did, toward fear dressed up as reason. If the deal collapsed, we could lose the house. Sophie might not have money for college. Everything I had, he reminded me, came from him. I should call Isabel in the morning and smooth it over, tell her it was a misunderstanding, nothing more. I told him I needed to sleep on it. He believed in that particular way men like Owen always believed, that he still had time to talk me back into agreement. That night, once his breathing had settled into the rhythm of a man who thinks he's already won, I got up and checked my credit report on my phone, the blue light, the only thing illuminating the dark of our bathroom. 3 business loans, $1.4 million combined, all of them in my name. I had never signed for any of them. I had spent the whole night thinking the worst thing Owen did was offer me up like a bargaining chip. But my name was already sitting on debts large enough to take everything I had left. I made coffee the next morning like it was any other day. Eggs toast, the same quiet kitchen routine I'd performed for 17 years, because the most dangerous thing I could do right now was let Owen see the woman who'd spent half the night staring at a credit report with her hand pressed over her mouth. He watched me across the counter, searching for cracks. I gave him none. "I'll call Isabel," I said, stirring my coffee slowly. "But first I need to understand exactly what I'm supposed to say." Relief moved through him so visibly it was almost embarrassing. He launched into his explanation, already rehearsed, already smoothed at the edges. The comment at dinner was just business culture, a joke that landed wrong Raphael's fault as much as the wine's. I apologized for overreacting. I watched him relax into the story he needed to believe, the one where his obedient wife had simply had too much to drink and too little perspective. He left for work convinced I'd folded back into the shape he preferred. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I called Maya Collins, a friend from another life back when we were both 20-something, and certain the world owed us something. She was a fraud litigation attorney, now sharp in a way that made people nervous in depositions. I hadn't spoken to her in years either, but some friendships apparently don't need maintenance, just the right kind of emergency. She gave me a list before I'd even finished explaining. "Don't sign anything. Change every password, email, banking, everything. Freeze my credit. Back up every piece of evidence I could find. Don't let Owen know what I'd discovered. And find out if there were any accounts or companies registered under my name that I didn't know about." I drove straight to her office. We found the loans first, 3 of them structured as collateral for Owen's project. If the Serrano deal closed, he could quietly pay them off before I ever noticed they existed. If it collapsed, I would be the one holding $1.5 million in debt I never agreed to. Then Maya found the contract. My signature was on it. Not close identical down to the slant of the L in my last name. Owen had lifted it from paperwork we'd filed together 3 years earlier when we refinanced the house. One document listed me as co-founder and financial guarantor of something I had never heard of in my life. I had never co-founded anything. I had trusted my husband to handle our taxes, our filings, the paperwork of a marriage, and in doing so, I'd handed him every signature he'd ever need to build a version of me that didn't exist. That night, once Owen was asleep, I thought about the small safe in his closet, the one he never talked about, and I never asked about. I knew the code, his late father's birthday, the same 4 digits he used for half his passwords, because Owen had never been as clever as he believed himself to be. Inside, I found copies of my ID and passport. A financial power of attorney I had never signed. Loan guarantee documents with my name typed neatly at the bottom. And 2 versions of the same equipment testing report, one showing the device had passed certification cleanly, the other, the real one, showing a failure rate well above what any hospital board would accept. I sat on the closet floor holding both pages, understanding for the first time that this wasn't only about money. If that device reached hospitals, it wouldn't just be my name at risk. It would be patients. At the bottom of the folder was a life insurance policy. $2 million. My name on it. Owen listed as primary beneficiary. Purchased 6 months ago, right around the time the loans had started. Maya, when I called her, was careful not to let me spiral. A policy alone proved nothing. Plenty of husbands insure their wives out of nothing more sinister than habit. But combined with the forged documents and the debt, it painted a picture of a man constructing a system where I absorbed all the risk and he collected all the reward. I lay awake replaying small moments that suddenly wore a different meaning. Owen insisting I see a doctor his insurance company had specifically recommended. The offhand questions about blood pressure medication asked twice, 3 times more than curiosity required. The remote cabin trip he'd proposed for after the deal closes. The joke, the one he'd made once at a dinner party, laughing that if I died he'd at least stop worrying about Sophie's tuition. I didn't know, not with certainty, whether Owen intended real harm or simply saw the policy as another form of collateral. But I knew I couldn't keep sleeping beside him without protecting myself either way. Maya laid out a plan with 3 parts. Shield me from financial liability. Prove Owen had forged my signature and falsified the safety report. Find out who inside Northbridge had helped him bury the truth. I couldn't leave the house yet. If I disappeared too soon, he'd have time to destroy evidence or worse. I had to keep playing the wife, trying to save the deal, smiling at dinner, asking small harmless questions, giving him nothing to suspect. I was gathering my things to leave Maya's office when my phone lit up with a message from Owen. "Someone from the company is coming by the house tonight. I need you to sign a confirmation. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I handed the phone to Maya without a word. She read it twice, then looked up at me calm and certain. "Don't refuse. Let him bring the paperwork. We need to see exactly what he's trying to make you sign." Owen came home that evening with a man I'd never met. Caleb Moore, some junior legal manager with a nervous habit of clicking his pen. Between them, they slid a confirmation letter across our dining table like it was nothing more than a formality. It stated that I had known about and consented to guaranteeing the loans, that I'd played an advisory role in the project, that my previous signatures were all valid, that any confusion at the Belmont dinner had simply been the wine-talking, nothing more. I let my brow furrow the way a confused, overwhelmed wife's brow might furrow. I asked why this needed to happen tonight of all nights. "Because Isabel is turning one sentence into an investigation," Owen said, his patience thinning at the edges. "Sign it, and everything goes back to normal." I told him I needed my reading glasses and carried the papers into the other room where I photographed every page and sent them straight to Maya before folding the documents back exactly as they'd been. When I returned, I said I wanted my old friend, the lawyer, to review it first. I didn't sign. Owen's jaw tightened, but with Caleb sitting right there, he couldn't push the way he wanted to. He'd have to wait. Buried in the paperwork was a name I recognized, Nina Patel, the project's former financial director. She'd approved the first budget draft, but somewhere along the way her name had vanished from every recent report. I remembered Owen once mentioning almost dismissively that Nina couldn't handle the pressure and had quit without notice. Maya hired a licensed investigator to track her down. Nina refused to talk at first. She'd signed an NDA, taken a severance payout, built a wall around whatever she knew. I sent her one line myself. "Owen used my name to guarantee numbers you refused to sign off on." She agreed to meet within the hour. What she told us reframed everything. The device had failed an independent inspection. Owen had asked her to adjust the failure rate. When she refused, he threatened to expose a minor accounting error from her own file, nothing criminal but enough to end a career if he wanted it to. Caleb had been drafting an NDA to keep her quiet permanently, and Owen had told her more than once that Serrano's investment would wash away every problem once it landed. Some of that money, she said, had already moved through a consulting firm called Foster Advisory Group. I had never heard of it. A quick search told me everything I needed to know. It was registered under my name. The address on file was a P.O. box Owen had rented months ago. He wasn't just forging my signature, he was using my identity as a wall between himself and money that shouldn't exist. Before she left the company, Nina had quietly copied everything. Emails where Owen demanded the report be altered. The original spreadsheet with the real numbers. Meeting notes where Owen said plainly, "Once the money's in the account, nobody cares about the first version." Wire records showing transfers to the company registered under my name. She was afraid of lawsuits, of losing her license, of becoming the story instead of the witness. I didn't pressure her. "I don't need you to save me," I told her. "I just need you to stop letting his silence protect him from doing this to someone else." She agreed to hand everything over to Maya on the condition that she'd be legally protected. When I got home, Owen was waiting, asking where I'd been. I told him I'd visited an old friend. He checked my phone's location history, but I'd left my old device at a coffee shop near the house hours earlier, deliberately, the way you leave a decoy behind. He had no proof of anything, only a growing unease he couldn't quite name, and it made him watch me more closely than he ever had before. That night he asked almost too casually, "You're still on my side, right?" I looked at him steady and said, "I'm trying to protect this family." He heard exactly what he wanted to hear. I meant something entirely different. Nina sent one more file before I went to bed, an old recording she'd kept from a meeting months back. Owen's voice unmistakable, talking to Caleb. "If Claire finds out, just tell her she already signed it. After 17 years, nobody's going to believe a housewife over a VP. I listened to it twice, sitting alone at the kitchen table in the dark. The phone's light, the only thing between me and the silence of the house." Then I called Maya. "Now," I said, "I want him to say that again. To my face. Maya confirmed the legal ground. First, the state allowed one party to record a private conversation without notifying the other. But to be safe, she wanted more than a phone in a pocket. She booked a small conference room at her firm with a clearly posted notice that audio and video could be recorded on premises, and rented it under a consulting company's name, so Owen wouldn't recognize it as hers. I texted him the bait I've been thinking. I'm ready to sign, but I want to understand exactly how I'd be protected if the deal falls apart. He answered within minutes, eager already, suggesting the hotel lounge where we'd first met Raphael. I redirected him to the conference room instead, framing it as more private, more serious. He didn't question it. He believed finally that his wife had come around. I walked into that room playing every part of the frightened, compliant woman he expected. I let my voice tremble slightly when I mentioned the house. I brought up Sophie's tuition, our reputation, the terrifying thought of starting over at 42 with nothing. Owen softened instantly, falling into the tone he always used when he thought he had the upper hand, patient, condescending, almost gentle. "You don't understand business," he said. "You just need to trust me." I asked why my name was on the loans. "Banks trust a family business more," he explained. "Using my name was just a formality." "And my signature?" I asked. "I signed for you. You always sign what I hand you anyway." I let that sit in the air a moment before pressing further. "So if something goes wrong, I'm the one responsible." He smiled, actually smiled, and said, "Only if the deal fails, and it won't fail as long as you do your part." I asked what exactly my part was. That was when he admitted it, casual, as ordering coffee. He'd thought Raphael might be drawn to me, thought it would make him look generous, willing to go further than any other partner Raphael might consider. He tried to soften it even as he said it. "I didn't actually mean for anything to happen. I just needed Raphael to believe I'd do whatever it took." "Including offering your wife to him." His patience cracked. "Don't turn this into some moral thing. This is $18 million. That sentence alone would end up meaning more than almost anything else he said that day, the plainest confession of what I'd always suspected, but never had proof of that. To Owen, I had always been worth less than the number on a contract. I kept going, telling him Isabel wouldn't reinstate the deal without a clean certification report. He didn't even hesitate. That report only needs to exist long enough for the money to transfer. After that, we switch component suppliers and fix everything quietly. And the hospitals that already ordered the device, nobody's in danger. It's just how the numbers get presented." I let him keep talking. He admitted Nina had been pushed out for not knowing how to be flexible. Every sentence out of his mouth was another nail, and he didn't even notice he was building his own coffin. At the end, I slid the unsigned confirmation letter across the table and asked if he'd be willing to write in his own hand that I had previously given him permission to sign documents on my behalf. He laughed at the suggestion, said he wasn't stupid enough to put something like that in writing. "That's fine," I said. "You just said enough." Something in my tone finally reached him. He looked around the room properly, for the first time noticed the small recording notice posted near the door, and I watched the blood drain from his face exactly the way it had at that first dinner, only this time there was no Raphael to soften the blow. He stood, demanded my phone. I didn't move. Maya walked in with a security officer a step behind her. She informed Owen calmly that he wasn't permitted to approach me or my documents, and that the bank had already been notified of suspected forgery. He pivoted to threats, told me I was about to destroy Sophie's future. "No," I said. "You already put her future on falsified debt. I'm just stopping you from finishing the job." He walked toward the door, and just before leaving turned back. "Nobody at that company is going to believe you." Maya looked at me once he was gone. "He still thinks this is just his word against yours." "Then let's give him a room full of people who are done staying quiet." The next morning, Isabel called. The $18 million signing ceremony was still scheduled, but it wouldn't be a signing anymore. It would be a board hearing, and Owen had no idea it was coming. Owen believed he'd won. The meeting notice landed in his inbox, and he read it exactly the way I knew he would, as proof that Isabel had backed down, that Claire had gotten scared, that the world was once again bending toward him. He put on his best suit that morning, rehearsed a speech in the bathroom mirror, and texted me before he left. After today, I'll decide if this marriage is even worth saving. I didn't answer. The ceremony was held at Northbridge's headquarters in a boardroom with a view expensive enough to distract from anything uncomfortable happening beneath it. Richard Hale, chairman of the board, sat at the head of the table. Raphael and Isabel Serrano arrived together, along with board members, legal counsel, and a representative from the bank. Owen came in with Caleb trailing behind him like a shadow that hadn't yet realized it was about to be cut loose. Maya and I waited in an adjoining room with Nina. We weren't announced yet. Owen opened the meeting the way he opened everything: growth projections, vision statements, talk of trust and responsibility to patients, calling the project the future of ethical healthcare, with a straight face that almost impressed me even now. When he finished, Richard asked legal to confirm the paperwork was in order. Before anyone could answer, Isabel spoke. She wanted clarity on the ownership of Foster Advisory Group before any signature touched paper. Owen said it was his wife's consulting company. Richard asked if I was involved in management. Owen, without missing a beat, said I was fully aware and had consented to everything. That was my cue. I walked in. I didn't accuse him right away. I simply said, I have never operated Foster Advisory Group. I have never received $1 from that company, and I have never signed a single guarantee tied to it. Owen recovered fast, telling the room I was upset over marital issues, that this was personal, not professional. Maya stepped forward with the folder she'd been building for weeks, a forensic signature analysis registration records tied to an email account Owen controlled, upload logs showing the documents had been created from his own office computer, my credit report, the wire transfers. Page after page laid out with the calm precision of someone who had done this before and would do it again. Owen turned on Caleb, said he'd only been following instructions. Caleb, pale and sweating, insisted he hadn't known the signatures were forged. Then Nina walked in. She confirmed everything: the pressure to falsify the certification report, the threats, the wire transfers into the company bearing my name. Owen called her a disgruntled former employee. She said nothing in response. She simply pressed play on the recording she'd kept, and Owen's own voice filled the room, telling Caleb that nobody would believe a housewife over a vice president. The silence that followed had weight to it. Richard Hale looked directly at Owen. Is the housewife you're referring to the same woman currently standing in this room? Owen didn't answer. He couldn't. Then Maya played the recording from the conference room, every admission laid bare in his own voice. That he signed for me because I always signed what he handed me. That the debt was only dangerous if the deal failed. That the certification report only needed to survive long enough for the wire transfer to clear. That the dinner with Raphael had been nothing more than proof he'd do anything for $18 million. Raphael stood. He told the board plainly that he had never asked for or accepted anything involving Claire as part of any arrangement. Isabel followed, announcing that Serrano Capital was withdrawing from the deal entirely and forwarding every document to the appropriate regulators. Owen's composure finally broke. He stopped denying and started pleading that I'd misunderstood, that everything he'd done was for this family, that the company would collapse. Without the deal, that hundreds of employees could lose their jobs, that I was letting emotion destroy everything he'd built. You didn't build this for the family, I told him. You used the family as collateral. Richard ordered Owen's phone, and building access revoked on the spot, security escorting him from the room. Caleb was suspended before the door had even closed behind them. On his way out, Owen turned back one last time. After everything I gave you, this is how you repay me. You didn't give me a life, I said. You built a cage and called it protection. He tried to step toward me. Security blocked him before he got close. I didn't flinch, didn't cry. I watched the man I had once loved get walked out of a room he believed would be his greatest triumph. When the door finally shut, Maya leaned toward me, her voice low. This isn't over yet. He still owns half the house. He still has access to accounts. I looked down at the divorce filing already sitting in my bag papers I'd prepared days ago, waiting for exactly this moment. Not for much longer, I said. In the weeks that followed, the consequences moved faster than I expected. Owen was terminated from Northbridge for fraud, forged records, and breach of fiduciary duty. The company self-reported to the medical device regulators. The banks froze every loan tied to his name and mine. A forensic handwriting review cleared me of liability once the forged signatures were confirmed. Foster Advisory Group was dissolved. Prosecutors opened a formal investigation. Caleb cooperated in exchange for a reduced charge. Nina was compensated, and her professional reputation quietly restored. Serrano Capital walked away from the investment, but Isabel stayed close enough to help Northbridge rebuild the project under a safer, honest process, one that didn't require anyone's silence to survive. I won't pretend Owen faced immediate dramatic justice. That's not how these things actually go. He was facing multiple charges, and the legal process was still grinding forward, slow and unglamorous, the way real consequences usually are. The divorce itself was its own kind of battle. I filed and requested a temporary restraining order. No access to the house, no moving assets, no contact with Sophie outside of a lawyer's presence, no chance to quietly delete anything electronic before discovery could reach it. Owen tried predictably to turn our daughter against me. He told her I'd destroyed the family. I didn't retaliate by handing her every ugly detail. I gave her only what a 16-year-old needed to carry. "Your father made some very dangerous decisions," I told her, sitting across from her at our kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a coffee mug I wasn't drinking from. "I'm not asking you to pick a side. I'm asking you to understand that staying quiet doesn't always hold a family together." She was angry at first, confused, caught between two versions of the same story. But once she read the parts of the case file appropriate for her to see something in her shifted. She stopped seeing this as her mother's revenge and started seeing it for what it actually was. I sold the house once the settlement cleared. It had never really felt like mine anyway, every room decorated to impress people Owen wanted something from. I moved into a smaller townhouse near Sophie's school, modest, quiet, entirely my own. There was no fairy tale windfall waiting for me on the other side of that courtroom. I had to rebuild my credit from the ground up, refile years of tax paperwork that had been handled and mishandled without my knowledge. Learn how to manage accounts that weren't shared with anyone. Step back into a job market I'd been absent from for almost a decade. And somewhere underneath all of it, sit with the quiet shame of realizing how many warning signs I'd let pass, because believing him had always been easier than questioning him. Isabel, true to her word, connected me with a healthcare compliance firm, looking for someone with exactly my background. I didn't get the job out of pity. I sat through interviews, took a technical assessment, competed against candidates half my age, with resumes that hadn't gone quiet for 10 years. I earned the position the same way I'd earned everything before Owen convinced me to set it aside. I started part-time. Within months, I was leading the risk investigation team. A few months after the hearing, Owen requested a meeting through our attorneys to finalize the plea and asset division. He looked smaller across that table than I remembered, the confidence gone, something hollow in its place. "I just need you to trust me one more time," he said. "I trusted you for 17 years, I told him. Trust was never what you were missing." He asked quietly if I'd ever actually loved him. "I loved the man I thought you were," I said. "I won't keep sacrificing for the one you chose to become." I signed the papers. I stood up. I walked out without looking back. Sometimes I think about that dinner at the Belmont, the exact moment my marriage actually ended. It wasn't the divorce filing. It wasn't the courtroom. It was a restaurant table, chandeliers overhead, my husband speaking a language he assumed I didn't understand. But the moment that mattered most wasn't his sentence at all. It was mine, the choice not to react the way he expected. I didn't beg. I didn't make a scene. I didn't warn him. I listened. And for the first time in longer than I could admit, I trusted what I heard with my own ears more than I trusted his explanation for it. They say a marriage ends the day the papers are signed. That wasn't true for me. Mine ended at a dinner table in a language my husband thought I couldn't hear. But my life didn't end there. It started again. Because the moment a man decides your dignity is a fair price for his ambition, you stop owing him the job of protecting his dreams. You start protecting yourself. What would you have done if you heard your husband say those words? Would you have confronted him right at the table, or waited the way I did until you had enough proof to make it undeniable? Tell me in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from tonight. If Claire's story gave you something to sit with, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We have so many more stories like this one waiting for you.